This is a salvia, and this is a very strange salvia. It comes from Mexico, and it's called Salvia regla, Regla. It's a very shrubby one. You can keep it as short or as tall as you want. Mine is about 8 feet tall, 7, 8 feet tall, I suppose, and it's growing together with hibiscus, and it's quite woody at the base. Now, this for me is the first year that it's ever flowered before end of September, beginning of October. This year it started flowering in July and it's been flowering ever since. And you can see we've got these lovely tubular orange flowers, but after the flowers are finished, you're left with this very decorative calyx.
Hello and welcome to Talking Dirty. Over at East Ruston Old Vicarage, we have Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and very handsome horticulturalist.
How very kind you are, Thordis. I love all the colours you've got this morning. You actually match your Christmas tree. You're all in those lovely blues and turquoise and reds, and how festive you look.
Well, just you wait. Hang on a minute. Here comes the reindeer. Reindeer on my stomach. Anybody who does follow my social media, my Instagram, really the only thing I do very sporadically, Thunder Fairy, I managed to find a sweater, the same exact one, but in the size that sort of fits my little boy. It's a bit big, but never mind. So we could be matching when we went to the university, Cambridge University Botanic Light, kind of winter light extravaganza, which was really beautiful. If you ever get the chance to go to that, like music and lights and all of these glorious, huge specimen trees lit up and, illuminated.
Yeah, I think we have something similar here at Sandringham House, the King's residence in Norfolk, and I mean it is quite spectacular, I believe. Although there was one little grumble I did hear that the drinks were rather expensive.
Oh,
and I did hear from somebody that actually works in Sandringham at Sandringham. The English people are going on the walk, but they're not buying the drinks, but the foreigners are.
well, we went all out. We don't go out very often, and we took our little person with us. But I had a Bailey's hot chocolate. It was very expensive, but it was worth it. And it was very decadent. The reason we are here, and thank you for bearing with us, it's obviously been a little while since we did this, and we have missed it. There are various reasons why we haven't caught up, but we couldn't let the year end without finding a moment to sit down and talk, not least because, of course, of all the things that have happened this year, the biggest, greatest, most seismic change has been the loss to you, to the gardening world, to all of us, of your husband Graham a couple of months ago now, though I suppose it doesn't really feel like it. I don't want to dwell on the sad side for you and make this a really awful experience, but obviously it is a huge loss to the garden as much as anything, because he was always, so full of ideas, and you've talked so often about playing bat and ball and, the garden evolving out of your conversations and arguments.
Well, arguments, bat and ball, yes. I mean, that was Christo Lloyd that coined that phrase with us, and he said, you do like a debate, don't you? And you sound as if you're going to kill each other, but you never do." Unfortunately, he managed to live a few more years after Christo said that. But yes, it's a very sad time, and unfortunately, Graham is now no longer with us. And it's actually quite devastating, I have to say. But at the end of it, I think what happens is that. You, in actual fact, suddenly pull your socks up and you say, "Well, come on, it's up to me now." And it happened to me when I was going through the desert, and I'll tell you why. Because the desert wash, as you know, was Graham's garden and still is. And there's a piece at the end of it that a new bed at the end of it that he hadn't planted. He'd actually made the bed and put the new soil in it and stones around it and all the rest of it. And then it's from now for me to plant. So. It's quite interesting in a funny sort of way, because you know how we say gardens change when their owners change. And I think that probably this will as well. Although I shall continue the theme of Graham's planting. I mean, it won't necessarily be the same, because I have my ideas and he had his ideas. And, when we had bat and ball, we could refine those ideas. But I largely let him get on with the desert. And so what you see in the desert is largely Graham's planting. But I've gone forward a little bit with that, because I've got this lovely big new bed, and I can't leave it. I've got to plant it. Now I've got lots of agaves in the greenhouse that Graham had been nurturing and bringing on to actually plant in this bed. But of course it's far too early to do that. And although we had early December frosts, which is amazing because after the early frost in December, everything looked devastated. And the end of December or middle of December, I'm going out and I'm picking bunches of roses. And the thing is, you pick them when they're in bud, but showing colour. And if there's any damaged petals, you gently take those off from the outside and just leave them in. I put mine in the laundry room, which is just really, it's cold room, but it's sheltered. Leave them in there for a day so that they take up water and then bring them into the house. And they gradually open and they look, to all intents and purposes, as good. I mean, I had to take photographs because they just look so lovely. Um, yes, so, and so I think probably the desert wash, the new bit of the desert wash will change slightly because it's me planting and not Graham planting it. And one of the things I did is I went to a dear friend of ours called Joe Sharman and asked him if he had some anemone pavonina, which is an anemone that grows across the Mediterranean. And it's one of those little plants that comes up and blooms in these jewel-like colours of mauves and purples and bright reds and blues and whites, creams. And it's a lovely thing, but it estivates. In other words, as soon as the weather gets too hot, it disappears underground. And then it's a winter leaf and it comes up the following year. I've had several in the garden for quite a few years, but they haven't self-sown for me, at least not dramatically. But I'm hoping that in the desert, with the winds and I mean, there's the seeds are like little sort of clouds of white fluffy stuff, and they'll get blown into the desert and they'll be caught up on thorns and snags and things like that. And we will eventually get some self-sown seedlings there. So hopefully that's happening. And the other thing that's happening in the desert, of course, I mean, Agave montana, the first one flowered 2.5 years ago. Another one flowered last year. And the scape, the flower scape that is still standing, the bracts which were holding the flower stems at the top, they've opened out and they've turned bright red, red and yellow. So it is really it's still a striking piece of attractiveness in the garden. It just looks amazing. And we've got two new agaves with flower spikes on for next year. So all this is, I mean, this is done, I think, possibly to climate change. We have to look at it that way because here we are, nearly Christmas time. Can you believe it? Nearly Christmas 2026. And I mean, I just went out this morning and I've done two full scale pages of plants that have done well or doing well. Um, because of the record hot summer that we had, I think. And you get a summer like that, and that it comes along, and it ripens the wood and makes everything sort of flower early, especially when the winter weather is benign. For instance, I have a white flowered Daphne bholua, and it's just near the garage. So every time I go to get in the car to whatever I need to get in the car for, I walk past it and it assaults me with this wonderful fragrance. And it doesn't normally flower until, well, round about Christmas time, but slightly after, even into the beginning of January. But this year, it's fully out, fully in flower, and it's just really lovely. The other
12
thing that I
degrees today. I mean, the temperatures. I'm in
exactly,
a jumper, but I'm pretty warm.
yeah. The other thing that happened, we have two outside our vegetable greenhouse. We have two pots with dwarf pomegranates in them, and they have these lovely little trumpet-shaped, messy, sort of slightly messy double flowers, bright red. There's a little bit of orange in there as well, and they have ripened about four little pomegranates on them, and they are dwarf pomegranates. And I mean, I haven't looked inside them because I think it's a waste of time. They're tiny things, but they are the perfect shape and everything for a pomegranate. And I just think that doesn't happen every year, does it?
No, no. I mean,
So,
the exciting thing for you is obviously your experimentation tends to be on what will survive through a winter, but actually
hmm,
it therefore means that you're being rewarded with all these. We've talked about it with salvias and maybe species dahlias that wouldn't have previously performed, but because the season's been extended, you do get flowers on them. You are getting extra rewards. Not only are you maybe getting things
yeah.
through the winter by testing it, but then they're doing other stuff. They're fruiting or they're flowering, which you might not have thought you were going to get.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And the other thing I think what happens with me is that I mean I take a plant like Cordyline Charlie Boy. Now Charlie Boy is this outrageous pink and sort of red striped leaves and all the rest of it. And I look at it
Knocks
and
your
I think,
socks off.
yeah, it does knock your socks off. And I looked at it and I thought, well, is that garden worthy? I don't know. I'm going to plant a group of three. So I planted a group of three and they've grown irregularly. So we've got one up there, one down there, and one at the bottom. So we have a group of three. And it wasn't until this year that I've felt the true value of them. And I think it's because they've now got big enough. They're not that sort of little rosette on the ground. They're sort of up there and they're surrounded by other evergreens. And I walked through the Mediterranean garden the other day. The sun was shining on them, and I thought, boy, my God. And you're absolutely right. It does knock your socks off. And I think they're well worth having for the fact that they give you colour when there's not much else around to give you colour.
It must have been on one of your snowdrop days, which obviously, is a time of year when we might be lucky and it might be one of those really glittering days. But you're walking through a garden where one of the joys is you're seeing the bare bones and the structure underneath it. And then you come round and suddenly, pow, there's this hit of bright pink. And it's amazing. And what a plant.
Yeah, we're talking about snowdrops. We've had snowdrops out for goodness knows how long. And I mean, you always sort of think, well, there won't be any left when the regular snowdrop day comes around, if you like. But I mean, which incidentally is on the 8th of February, Sunday, the 8th of February. And it starts at 10 o'clock. And we have umpteen snowdrops. And, you know, it is just amazing. The difference in, I think, probably the ripening of the bulbs in the summer and, and the season that we've got now. It really does trigger them into growth. And I mean, three ships, I normally think of Galanthus, three ships as flowering, a guarantee on Christmas Day. I saw three ships come sailing by, that's why, And this year it was blooming, well, probably about a week and a half ago, I suppose. So you'll say the beginning of December, which is really quite irregular. But I looked on Galanthus. What's Brian
Galanthaholic.
Galanthaholic? Thank you. I looked on his website and well, I look at it nearly every day actually, and he's been putting a new snowdrop on every day for weeks and weeks and weeks. But it's interesting because Brian doesn't just. I mean, he's a nutter about snowdrops. I know that. I mean, not many people would be quite that enthusiastic about them, but he knows the bulb. He knows the story behind it. He knows the little quirks about it, where it came from, who gave it to who, and all the rest of it. And that makes it all the more interesting, doesn't it?
There is something alluring about snowdrops, and obviously I'm going to be pulled in by them, not least because of the infectious enthusiasm of people like you, of Brian, of Joe Sharman, of Ian Roof, of Joe Whitehead, all these people. The list
Yeah,
goes
yeah,
on and
yeah.
on of all the people I know who love snowdrops and collect them. And obviously, I mean, Joe Whitehead at Burley House really increasing their collection in the garden. But my partner is not into plants, and so many of the things I buy, he's not enthused by. So many of the plant fairs I want to go to, he's sort of being dragged around. And yet, we were standing in the Botanic Garden at this light show, and one of the features was all about pollination, and they had this big projection onto one of the buildings with all of these different pollinators and different blooms being flashed up onto it, really beautiful. And then it came round to the beginning of the year and the Galanthus, and he said, "Yeah, do you know, I'm really excited about the snowdrops. I think I might be a bit of a Galanthophile." know, he just can't resist them. He does not want doubles or, walrus or anything that's a bit different. He
Yeah,
wants
yeah.
them to be as pure as possible, but he still just finds them magical.
Well, one of the best varieties, and probably Brian will shoot me in the foot for saying this, but I only say it because at York Gate it's been a huge success, and it's a variety called S. Arnott, and it's quite a vigorous snowdrop, and it's an unadulterated snowdrop. It has lovely foliage. It's a nice, strong growing snowdrop, and it's a great increaser. And I think Sybil at York Gate in near Leeds, I think she started off with, well, they'll tell you she started off with a clump. She might have started off with 10 clumps. Who knows? But I mean, there's sheets of them there today. And that's only done by digging and dividing and digging and dividing. And that's how you do it. Because I mean, if you want to do it quickly, that's the way to do it. If you want to wait, like our Victorian forefathers did, I mean, these grand country houses with sheets of snowdrops, they've got that through the snowdrop self-seeding. And they found their ideal situation where they're under a sheltered canopy of trees, probably growing through moss, so it's reasonably moist. But the seedlings germinate, and then the bulbs go to bed for the summer, and then the trees green up, and they just sit there and they wait their turn, and then they start growing again. They do all their growing when the leaves are down, which is symbiotic, I suppose, in a way.
the place in Norfolk, which of course is very famous for its snowdrops, is Walsingham. And if you talk to somebody as knowledgeable as Joe Sharman about those snowdrops, I think there's in terms of the stories they tell, because of course people have been coming on pilgrimage to Walsingham for so long, there is this idea that people brought this white flower of the Virgin, and that actually in the genetics of the Walsingham, it looks to all intents and purposes like we've just got a bog standard drift, but if you really get into the genetics of those, there's all kinds of little differences that come from different parts of the world where people have brought their offering on pilgrimage. And I mean, isn't that just extraordinary?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, the soldiers that went out to the Crimea War brought lots of them back. And I mean, you couldn't go to a shop and buy something lovely for your sweetheart. So what were you going to bring? And there were no rules and regulations in those days. So you brought something that you could have in the garden, that you could keep, that you could remember, and everything else. And I just think that was absolutely lovely. But what do you plant with snowdrops today if you want to have winter interest? And my great thing and lots of people say, oh, you don't want those, they're trouble, they seed everywhere, blah, blah, blah. And that's Arum pictum and Arum maculatum. I mean, they both have lovely foliage in selected strains, and Joe Sharman is a great one for selecting various strains. In fact, there's one that's named after his nursery called Monksilver, and it's one of the larger growing ones, and it has nice large wavy leaves with grey and silver markings all over them. And since I've been into Arum, picked a maculatum, call it what you will, and I mean, I tend to let them self-sow. And the thing is, I'll tell you a story. I saved some seed from a particularly lovely one, and rinsed the seed to get all the germination inhibitors off. I sowed it, and up came the seedlings. I had a full tray of seedlings, and I looked up and I sort of looked at them and I was rather disappointed that they're all plain green. And so I thought, it's coming. I and so I thought, well, I'll keep them for a little while and see what happens. So I kept them and they stayed plain green. And I thought, well, out you go. And then somebody told me, yes, but they don't get their true colors until the second year. So don't be too hasty, eh?
So
That
have
was
you
a
done it
moral.
again? Have you found another special one that you're going to go through the whole process with?
No, because I have special ones all over the place now because that was, I suppose, 15 years ago. But that, I have been collecting them and they cross-pollinate. And so nice ones, good ones are coming up all over the place. There's one underneath the window box on the laundry room, which has got lots of lovely yellow splashes on the leaves, which is obviously a virus because that's what variegation is. But I did actually make a mental note to dig that one up and propagate from it because it is a good one, and it's a decent size as well.
Talking of splashes on foliage, completely different plant, but in terms of something that we were talking about recently on the garden party on the radio, Sundays, 11 till 1, podcast version available at facebook.com/Thunder Fairy Radio, plug of the week. The Musa that you didn't realize you'd got some Bengal tiger, and that obviously you don't do a lot of protecting plants over winter in your garden, not least because of climate change, but also because, as you always say, life's too short to stuff a mushroom. But Bengal tiger, which I don't know how many you've got, how long you've had them, but you have been giving them a bit of protection because they're just something a little bit different, a little bit special, and possibly a bit pricey.
I don't think they were too bad price wise, but I bought them. I bought them in. So they came in. I brought them wholesale, and they came into the nursery. And Ian thought, quite rightly, when he was here gardening one day, he thought, well, we ought to have them in the garden because our policy is really to grow the things that we sell, so that we can actually, speak honestly about how they do for us. And most things do pretty well, but I mean, you want to know how they're going to grow, if there's any quirks about them and all the rest of it. This is one of my beefs with seed companies and seed catalogs. But so what we did is Ian sort of filched three off the plant stand and he planted them in the woodland area, which is semi-shaded and sheltered, which is what they like. And anything with a big leaf like a banana, if you can keep it out of the wind, the leaves will stay whole for longer because they do shred quite readily. And apparently, they have evolved strictly to do this because where they grow in the Windward Islands, think of the name, it's windy. And so if their leaves didn't split, the whole thing would just get wrecked. So the leaves split. And they look ragged and all the rest of it. I remember seeing it at Tree Bar in Cornwall, bananas growing there, and it was an early part of the year. It must have been probably, I think, May or even earlier. And I looked at these bananas and I said to Graham, who on earth would want to grow a disgusting, raggedy looking plant like that? And here we are 50 years later growing the wretched things. But that is because we can. That back then we couldn't. And so there was no point in trying, you know. But Bengal tiger I have wrapped, at least to get it through its first winter. And I have looked at it I looked at it online yesterday afternoon, in actual fact. And it is reckoned to be slightly more tender than Musa. So, you know, you paid your money and well, you don't want to waste your money. So,
No.
but I have to say that Steve did a wonderful job. They're like little sculptures, black heads, and then this stalk of hay, and they're only about sort of 2, 3 feet high, but they look like little people.
I did when we were talking to Ian Roof about it, did he say you'd put kind of a wire cage around them to stuff with straw or something?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
but wire netting cage, stuffed it with straw, and then over the top of the plant, we put an old compost sack turned inside out, so you only see black polythene, just to protect the crown, to sort of stop too much wet getting into the crown. So hopefully they will survive.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed, because they are. I don't know how long it takes for those big splashes on the leaves to really come about, how mature the plant has to be, but certainly it's a very striking foliage marking.
Well, at the moment, they're not very big splashes. They're more like little dots, I think. But talking about foliage color, there was two plants that I grew this year, which had outstanding autumn color. One of them is a Lagerstroemia, which is a plant I think that comes to New Zealand, Australia. It's a tree or a large shrub or a tree, and it normally blooms with white, pink, or dark red flowers. I haven't got to the flowering stage yet, but they're only young plants and they're starting to grow through go through the winter unscathed. And I don't cover them up or anything, but the Lagerstroemias had the most amazing red foliage. And I think the one I've got is a white flowered variety, which is rather dull, perhaps, I suppose, but maybe that's the best one we can grow outside at the moment in England. And the other thing was a new variety of Weigela. And I don't know whether you're aware of the fact that Weigelas, I mean, we all know, we remember Weigelas because they were in everybody's granny's garden and all the rest of it. But there's been breeding work done on them now so that they flower 3 or 4 times a year. In other words, they have a flowering succession, then they have a rest, then they have another one, then they have another one. But this Weigela that we've got, it had the most amazing red leaves again in the autumn. So that's another plant where the breeders, for once, have improved them because they're giving you a longer period of flower, plus the fact at the end of the year you get this bonus of these lovely coloured foliage.
And did you have a good season for brilliant autumn colour?
Yes, I think we did. I mean, the maples coloured up beautifully, and yes, it was. It was, but very definitely was. I mean, I can remember looking at various vines, vitis, and I'd forgotten that we have this big old dome. We call it the Dome of St. Paul's because it's that shape. It's covered with climbing roses, and I'd forgotten that there was a vine amongst it. And I walked around the corner and looked at it one day, and the sun was shining on. I thought, my goodness, look at that! It's a flame, and through the middle of it, there was these lovely branches of flaming foliage. And the other plant, I mentioned it on the radio the other day with you, was Euphorbia mellifera. The books, I came back and I looked it up online, and anywhere does it mention that it has the most wonderful autumn colour. But ours is a self-sown plant. It's in the Mediterranean garden, and it's hard against a north low wall. And it was beautiful. I mean, it's just like Flaming Katie. It was really very good.
Autumn was one thing. Right now, lots of people's gardens. I mean, we do the radio every week, and we do this thing now where people shout out plants that are looking good. And there
Yeah.
are, obviously, because of the weather, lots of things looking good. But your garden is always just another world. You know, there are so many things looking good. So, what have you been walking past which has really been wowing you now?
Well, I'm rather pleased with Iris unguicularis, the little Algerian iris that is a winter flowering plant, because some years ago, I think it was Ian Roof gave me a huge clump, several huge clumps of it actually, and I ideally divided them, put them in various places around the garden. And one of the places I put them was they want full sun, dry soil, and they want a baking. To do absolutely well. Well, they got that this year because I planted them at the foot of the Californian border in the desert, so they're really sitting on the side of the path. They don't get any irrigation at all, and they thrive on neglect basically. And because we've had this kind of kind weather at the moment, the flowers are coming up and they're not being spoilt by the weather. And there's huge clumps of lots and lots of flowers. They're not a name variety. In actual fact, I looked at some of the name varieties and some of them are not so good because there was a white flowered variety called Peloponnese Snow. And I was talking to a friend of mine called Rosie Steele, and I said, "Oh, I've got Peloponnese Snow." I saw it in her garden, and she said, "It's a messy thing, isn't it?" And I was so pleased to have seen a flower on mine. I hadn't realised that it is a very floppy grower, and its flowers get spoilt very quickly because they're a little bit tall for the foliage around it, and they flop over and then they get spoiled.
It's
So
sad those
yes, Rose.
moments though, when you like glee, childish glee. I've got a
Yeah,
flower. And they say, "Oh,
yes,
it's
I
rubbish though,
know.
isn't it?"
Yeah, I know. And there's another one. I think it might be called Walter
Ah.
Butt, which is very, very pale, I think. And it's nice. And there's a darker flowered form as well. But I'm quite happy with my straightforward Algerian iris because it's a mid mauve, it's full of flower, and it just looks lovely. And I'm so pleased with it. Um, Anyway, other things that are looking nice now, eucalyptus. I mean, whether they be trees of bushes that you stool, I've got one at the end of the Californian border, which I stool every year because it remarkably grows, I don't know, 8 or 9 feet in a season. And, so I cut it back. One of these years, it's going to say, right, I've had enough. Over to you, mate. I'm going to die. But anyway, it hasn't yet. But it's not got quite nice glaucous foliage, and they're not as blue as they could be, the leaves. But it's got nice red stems, so we use it as, for cutting. I had a self-saved seed of one of my dahlias, and it's a crimson one, and it's only just stopped flowering, and that was because we had frost on it and the weather. It didn't like it. I mean, the plant itself is still there, but the blooms have gone. That's something I liked, and the good old baboon's bottom, Fascicularia bicolor. Now I have plans to do messy, silly things with this because fascicularias are basically an epiphyte, which means that they grow on another plant or they grow in or on another plant, sometimes in the crooks of trees like orchids and things like that. And they have these roots that go out, and the fascicularias don't do that. But I was wondering if I could get some fascicularias growing on some of my tree ferns. It would just be an added thing because, an added feature because tree ferns, they play host to all manner of things. I've got sycamore trees growing on my tree ferns. I've got mimosa growing on my tree ferns. And I suppose it's that kind of queer type covering of the stems where seeds lodge in, and they get enough moisture and they can put a root out into that and get enough nutrients to grow. So that's another little thing I'm going to try. I keep saying I'm going to try all these things. Whether I find the time to, Thordis, of course, is another thing. But there you are. It's on the list.
Well, there are always so many things on the list. I think we never get to
Yes.
the end of our to-do list. But it is
Oh,
one of
no,
the
no.
reasons I always dream of a tree fern is that there is that opportunity. One of the things I love most about gardening is self-sown seedlings and finding things. One of the best things about weeding is as you're weeding, discovering all these,
Yeah,
little
yeah.
seedlings. That is just great. So the
I
idea
just
of
had
having
another idea. I just had another idea. I was just thinking, what else could I grow on tree fern while you were talking? And I suddenly thought Viola hederaceae, the little Australian violet. If you planted it at the top, it pushed it into the top, and it sends out runners, they would root as they go down. That's a possibility. Who knows? We'll see.
But certainly, if I ever get a tree fern, I want things seeding in it, or I will help them. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yep.
So that's an idea of the things that are looking good now. What jobs have you been doing other than turning your Musa Bengal Tiger into little people in the garden? What have you been doing? Kind of rearranging and reorganizing for the winter.
Well, of course, we have to take lots of tender things in, and we had this year two remarkably large begonias either side of the front door, begonia luxurians. They have this lovely sort of divided palmate foliage, which I suppose is their main feature. But I think that the flowering stems are absolutely marvelous because they're the great, huge, great cloud of very, very tiny cream flowers. And they do look spectacular. And several people in the garden throughout the summer have said, well, I've never seen luxurians grown so big as that. But because it is so big, you have to support it. So we have beside the front door, we have two battens screwed to the wall so we can discreetly tie it. Otherwise, a gust of wind comes and blows the top off it. So we've taken
Realize the
those.
huge amount of thought and artifice that goes into so much of this. There's so much tweaking and helping and guiding, the guiding hand of the gardener in your garden. It doesn't just happen by some sort of magic.
No, well, I take that. I take the attitude that I think Sybil Kreutzberger and Pam Schwartz had, who the famous lady gardeners at Sissinghurst, and when they went to their final garden, which was the garden house in the Cotswolds, I mean, they had a garden that was. It looked absolutely perfect. If you saw a weed, you would think, "My God," but they were fastidiously tidy. I'm not fastidiously tidy, but I have the same ethos that if a delphinium is growing, I don't want it to be flopping over. I want it to stand upright, but I don't necessarily want you to see as a visitor how I'm doing it. And Sybil was a great one for staking delphiniums in the invisible way that she had. And she never told anybody how she did it. People used to say they wouldn't dare do anything else other than stand upright for her. But there was a way of doing it, but she didn't share that with anybody. So you have to have these little nuances to do that. Back to the begonias, they are now safely tucked up under cover. And they're slightly cut back, reduced in size because they're going to grow again next year. And we have replaced them with some hollies. And we've been having these hollies for a few years now. We've got several plants of it, but two in particular that we've been growing on in pots. And Ian has been training them to be columns. And it's a variety. It's a very free berrying holly, and it's Ilex Nellie Stevens. If you look it up, you'll see that it has lots and lots of berries on it. And so we've got two columns of those to replace where the begonias were. I'm just waiting now until the berries get ripe, and I'll watch the berries disappear from the top down because that's the way the birds feed. But I'm enjoying them for now. So it's nice to have these things up your sleeve so that, I mean, for me, I would do it just for myself that I don't want my doorstep to look empty. I want it to look nice. We've got two pots with um, U globes in them. I mean, we're training them so that they're not absolutely wonderful at the moment, but they will be. But if people come along and they see them, they can actually see this is how you train a U dome, if you like.
Mm.
And we've got other plants there as well, but it's mainly evergreens and that kind of thing. And I think the other thing I was just going to say, when people do an evergreen or a winter pot, I saw it in one of the Sunday papers. There's a chap from it's a nursery just outside Richmond, or maybe in Richmond in London. He made the most marvelous winter pot full of winter flowering plants, and some of them weren't flowering; they were just foliage. But and it looks absolutely lovely. And I thought, at last, somebody who can plant a pot. Because I plant pots quite well, and I think that he has the ethos that I have. Pack them in, and if you think there's no room, squeeze in three more because you will find the space. Um,
I love
but
the modesty as well that Alan Gray, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say Alan Gray, he plants pots quite well. More like Alan Gray, king of containers.
well, well, I try. And anyway, so there's umpteen ways of making pots look nice throughout the winter, and I think one of the ways of doing it, in actual fact, is if you don't mind spending, I'm not going to say a fortune, but a little bit of money, and you can, you put your main ingredients in whatever they are. I've got some white berried skimmias in pots, and I put some white flowered. I went to the farm shop and they had some white flowered hellebores in bloom, very reasonably priced. And they were the kind of things that I would pay that wholesale price for. I don't know where they get them from, but I had to buy them, put in my pots, and they looked marvelous. But when you're doing pots like that, don't forget you don't have to have everything in pots, and it doesn't have to be everything have a root. Because if you cut coloured stems from corners and push those in between, that's a little bit of colour.
And if you're
And
lucky, they might root, and then you will have more corners.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You've got flowering stems or shoots on ivy and you haven't got much room, then push a piece of trailing ivy into the pot. And if it's got a cut end, it will absorb moisture from that pot and use it to twirl it round the edge of the pot. And it's all very easily done. And as you say, at the end of the winter, you might have a bonus and you can replace some of the pots that you've used, take out things when they go over. For instance, and buy some those little cheap pots of tete-a-tete, narcissus or paper whites or that kind of thing, and put them in pot and all, and hyacinths too. Quite often garden centres sell individual hyacinths in a pot. Put them in, bury the pot, and enjoy them while they're in the container. When they go over, snip the flower head off and plant the pot. Take it out of the pot, plant it in the garden. You'll have it for years.
Brilliant advice. This is what we come to Alan Gray for. Excellent tips. I mean, like Del Boy Gray, we need that kind of advice. Actually, that does bring me round to FOMO. Now, FOMO is that fear of missing out you get about a flower or a plant. Mine is a little bit different this time because it's not so much a FOMO as a sort of Marmite sensation, but it is the most striking thing that has happened to me when I have. I mean, I'm not, we all know I'm not allowed to buy plants at the moment. There's no time really for gardening in my life. And so every time I buy something, I worry that it's going to die. And I'm supposed to move house at some point, though, who knows when. So there are lots of reasons, but I still obviously go to garden centres. I still go and look at nurseries. I still look at things. But I was in a garden centre actually for Christmas decoration admiring. But my little boy, it turns out, actually wants to go to the standard part of the garden centre more than the Christmas part, particularly if there's anything sharp or dangerous. He is very magnetically drawn to those things. So my Christmas shopping has largely been around the forks and the secateurs, but also outdoors looking at all of the lovely plants. And it's the outside section of a garden centre. Oh, that's a nice display of pansies or violas or something. And I went over and I thought, they're not got cyclamen leaves. And then I looked a bit closer, and I obviously am aware that there are quite pink, purpley pinky cyclamens, but these were, and it seems to be a new one. I don't know if you've seen it other than the photo I sent you, because I basically the first thing I did was take photos and send it to Alan saying, something, is this everywhere? And I've just
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
my baby world and haven't seen it. It's cyclamen blue dragon, and so I don't know if you've seen it when you've been going. I think it's probably more of a garden centre thing. You immediately were like, well, do we need this? And I think probably the answer is no, because I'm so confused. My brain is so confused by the colour on that leaf. It just doesn't. It was such a bluey, purpley, I mean, a beautiful
Yeah.
colour, but it just my brain can't
It was
compute.
unnatural, wasn't it?
Yeah, I cannot work it out. So it's not so much a FOMO that I want them in my, but I desperately wanted to talk about them.
Well, I tell you what's interesting about that is this. I mean, if you look, I mean, I looked on the website of a Dutch grower the other day, and that cyclamen blue dragon was there, and I thought, shall I get a tray of it
It's
just for
so
the hell of it? You see, it is that kind of plant. It's Marmite. Do I like it? I don't know, but but I want to look at it. I want to taste it. I want to,
yeah, yeah.
I want to share with it. But I was looking at cyclamen in general, and I mean, there are cyclamen now. It's called something bell, where the flowers, the petals all hold together at the bottom. So it looks like a little bulb, a light bulb. It's weird. And there's cyclamen that open sideways, have sideways petals. They don't flare back anymore. All manner of things. And I'm rather pleased with myself because I bought a cyclamen last year from the farm shop. It's a purple flowered cyclamen and it's got its calyx behind the flower stays flat on top of the flower. So the petals can't open. They only open as far as the calyx goes. And the calyx is kind of green and flecked with grey and white. So it is a very attractive looking thing. Now, when I first looked at that, I had shock horror Marmite moment when I sort of thought, well, do I like it or not? I can't really make my mind up. Anyway, so I bought one and I grew it and I enjoyed it. And I kept the corm as my grandmother did by lying it on its side, facing in the sun, in the greenhouse, facing the sun to ripen it. And then in August, I took it out and I repotted it because it was in horrible compost that it came in, which has got no nutrients in it at all. So when I make my pot plant compost, I always use some loam in it and a little bit of bloodfish and bone. And duly potted it, and it started to grow, and there's little embryonic leaves forming on top of the corm. I did exactly what Granny said, and that was to always plant the corm above the ground, so the corm sits on top of the earth, and you just make a shallow dip if there's no roots on it, and just nestle it in, and then the roots come out and they go down. Which means that if you water it from the top, you water it, and the water will go around the corm, but not into the center where it can cause rotting, which is what a lot of cyclamen don't like. They also don't like our heated houses in this day and age either. But I have found, to be quite honest, that with this mild weather, did buy a couple for the house, and they started to go a little bit pallid, and I stuck them outside in a copper, and they look fantastic. The only problem is, again, you see, cyclamen, their colouring is quite strident, and somehow at this time of the year, that sort of feels wrong. It's almost got to be white, hasn't it? Or cream or lemon or that kind of thing. But there we are. I've yet to see a lemon cyclamen. But, sure as eggs are eggs, the way the breeders are going, it will happen.
And you have just reminded me, I can't believe we nearly did this whole podcast without me outing you. So this, if you listen to the radio, he's already been outed on live radio, so I can do it again on the podcast. If you didn't know, Alan Gray has at this very moment as we speak got a poinsettia in his house. And there is a very lovely story behind it, and there's a very good reason why. But Alan Gray, who you may or may not know, has seemingly, held on to a long time loathing of poinsettias, and has potentially been slightly won round.
Well, I don't loathe poinsettias. I mean, well, I do. I loathe the way they're grown. I think that's the problem because, and it became a little bit too much when I was going through a very well-known market department store, Marks and Spencer's, one day in their flower department, and there was all these pink poinsettias with glitter on them, and I just thought, now this is a step too far. For goodness sake, who's going to want it? And would you want to live with that after Christmas? I most certainly wouldn't. But my poinsettia, I had a pot that was given to me. It's a pot that was designed by some Italian chap called Fiorelli. I think it's Fiorelli. Is it? I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I'm not sophisticated enough to know.
Well, it's got kind of black and white and faces on it and things like that. And apparently he was quite. I didn't know anything about him until I got the pot. And the pot came as a big scented candle, and of course the scented candle is long since gone. And Graham and I were given it as a wedding present, in actual fact. Anyway, I kept the pot, and the pot needed something to fill it. And it's got sort of a kind of dirty cream background on this pot. And I saw this cream poinsettia in my farm shop, and it was the only one left. And that's nothing to do with it, but there was only one left. And I thought, that might look quite good in my pot on the table in the morning. So I bought it, and it is looking very nice, and I like it. So
There you go.
I don't like always the things that people think I'm going to like. But I mean, the overly large heads on poinsettias are awful. If you see them growing in the wild, then it's a different matter because they're 8, 10, 12 feet tall, a messy looking shrub, really. But the flower heads, which are not flowers at all, they're bracts, but they are quite small, and they look in proportion to in the right proportion to the size of the plant they're growing on. But when they're forced into a pot and they've got this whopping great thing saying, "Hey, look at me, I'm like a big dirty red handkerchief," I'm not so fond. But there we are.
But there we go. Alan's got a very tasteful poinsettia in his house. Have you got any further flomos to share? I mean, you've regaled us with a wonderful 2-page list of plants.
Well, I mean, I do have a dahlia that I rather like, and it's one of my self-sown seedlings. And I tell you this because it's not how you should grow dahlias, but it's growing beneath a hardy fuchsia, and the hardy fuchsia didn't get cut back quite hard enough last year, and it forced the dahlia to sort of spread out. And so this dahlia, which is a crimson flowered single, would normally grow to about 4 feet tall, but it's done it along the ground. And it's kept pace with the fuchsia. As the fuchsia grows, the dahlia grows. And then the flower stems come up. And so they've made a lovely sort of a ring, or they didn't, they've gone now, but they made a lovely sort of ring around the dahlia, around the fuchsia. And I just thought, you see, not all plants have to be staked with an inch of their life to look good. And, people were saying to me, visitors to the garden were saying to me, you should propagate that because that's such a lovely dahlia. We'll see.
There's a flomo,
It's another job to add to an
yes,
ever-growing list.
yes, the never-ending, ever-growing list.
I think the other thing I'd like to just mention is the fact that Ian, working in the garden here, he planted a plumbago in the garden in late February, early March, and I said to him, "You're wasting your time with that. That'll get clobbered." And he said, "Well, we'll just see because we've got plenty." So I thought I'd put it in. It's got the shelter of a wall, an east-facing wall. And to my amazement, it lived and it thrived and it grew and it looked wonderful. And next to it, I planted something called a climbing Alstroemeria, which is Bomaria caldacei, bright orange flowers in big panicles. And I was absolutely thrilled that they've both done so well this summer. The Bomaria will go underground for the winter because it has a rhizomatous rootstock, really. And it is related to Alstroemeria, so because the flowers, you will see the relationship immediately you see it. And hopefully it will be bigger and better next year. And I just hope the plumbago will survive. And who knows? I mean, in this changing climate, we can but try. And quite often, we are surprised, as I was yesterday when I went into the little garden that's the other side of the Pharaoh's Gate, which is the last big piece of gate that Graham designed for the garden. And he's buried the other side of that gate, but on this side, on the south side of the gate, there's a cleanthus, and I'm looking at the cleanthus, and down below, when the sheltered bit right at the bottom, the first lobster claw is open, and I thought, oh, lovely, here we go.
Here we go. And this has been a wonderful way to draw 2025 to a close. We will obviously do our best to be back in 2026. Thanks for bearing with us. And thank you for all of the lovely messages we get. And thank you for
Oh,
people who
yes.
sort of say, oh, are you coming back? And every message you get, if you don't hear a reply, it is only frantic. Running around. I often think, you say I'm running around, pardon my language, like a blue-arsed fly. I think I have just become the blue-arsed fly. I mean, that
I've never seen a fly with a blue backside.
is me now. But every message you send, we love them. We listen, we read them, we take them to heart. So thank you so much. If you have been a fan, if you've taken the time to message, it really means a lot to us. So thank you for that. Thank you for watching and listening and being part of the Talking Dirty family. And have a wonderful Christmas.
Oh, yes, I hope you get your heart's desire for Christmas and make it a nice planty one, I think. 'Cause, if you give a gift like a plant, it's a gift that keeps on giving. So every year when the plant flowers, you will be reminded of where you found it, who gave it to you, and all the rest of it. It's lovely.
Just remember my thing that if you give a plant, or I suppose even seeds, don't put the poor person through asking in the future how it is faring, just in case it died. What an absolutely wonderful way to spend however long it's been, an hour. Have a wonderful Christmas, and we'll see you next year. Happy gardening, everybody.
All the best, everybody. Happy gardening.
There we go. I can see you, and I think I can hear you.
Our electricity's just gone off.
That's
Oh, well, there
it
you are.
really is
Never
one of
mind.
those days. So
It's not dark. Get on with it. I've made a list.
hello, and let me just take it's definitely recording. Panic.
The what's it called?
There you go.
Plumbago. Thank you. I just hope the pomegranate. I just hope the plumbago.
Oh no, did it freeze at that point? That's good. We've recorded it now.